I did an internship my junior year in high school, and the general manager of the radio station I did the internship with said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to be a DJ." He said, "Well, let me tell you about being a radio DJ. Number one is you're going to have to move around the country a lot. Number two, you don't make money unless you are in morning drive. And number three, you're not funny."
Dave Bolger here, and welcome to Had I Known, conversations with interesting members of the Hamilton College community. This week's guest is Jim Rushton, class of 1992. All right, welcome back to another one. You know, when you have a show like this and have conversations with the type of people that I've been having conversations with, inevitably they go off and do more interesting things. So I wanted to take a minute before we start the show to give a couple updates on some former guests. First, remember comedian Gabe Malika? Well, Gabe just announced that his one-hour show, Solo, will be debuting off-Broadway at the Soho Playhouse. He'll be doing an 8-show run in the early part of November, November 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and then the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th, all at 9 p.m. They'll be playing at the Soho Playhouse. You can get tickets at sohoplayhouse.com or in the link in the show notes. Gabe's been posting a lot of clips from various comedy shows he's been doing, and man, he's crushing it. So congratulations, Gabe. If you can, go check out that show. And then how about Lauren Cupp, the men's and women's golf coach at Hamilton? And if you remember from that conversation or from the countless national news stories that have covered her as the world's #1 speed golfer, Lauren, as of the release of this episode on Sunday morning, has finished round 1 of the 2022 U.S. Speed Golf Open, the national championship of speed golf. She's, of course, the defending women's champion in that tournament. And on Saturday, she completed the first round with a score of 75 and a time of 48.26. She said on social media that it's the fastest time she's completed this year, just a few shots off her record pace. So she's in position to defend her crown as the women's national champion. But how about this? She's also competing against the men. And after round 1, she's in the top 10 in the leaderboard. So best female speed golfer in the world, and very likely the best speed golfer in the world, period. Congratulations and best of luck on Sunday, today, when this episode releases, round 2 in the final round for Lauren. Awesome stuff. So while Lauren was shooting a 75 in 48 minutes, I was shooting a 93 in about 4.5 hours. She was running, I was walking. But I was walking. I will say that. No cart. I was walking, carrying my own bag. So, you know, it was kind of like exercise, kind of the same thing. But we'll pivot from golf to another sport that's near and dear to my heart, and that's football. With this week's guest, Jim Rushton, who is the Senior Vice President, Business Strategy and SoFi Stadium Affairs for the Los Angeles Chargers. This one is interesting to me personally because, well, for a few reasons. One, a lot of times you hear about people using the Hamilton Network as a student to connect with alumni about potential career paths. Jim was one of those people for me. I talked to him a little bit about it in the conversation, but when I was a student at Hamilton interested in getting into radio, Jim Rushton was a guy I reached out to because he worked in radio. And he was kind enough to spend time with me and give me advice. And if you heard my conversation with Frankie V, he was a big help in building his massive radio career. This was a fun one. He's a really nice guy. Clearly feels a lot of love and connection to Hamilton comes up several times throughout the conversation. And he shares some insightful stories about working in media and working in sports. So if those things are interesting to you, as they are to me, I'm sure you'll enjoy this one. Here is my conversation with Jim Rushton, class of 1992.
But sunny day here today. Another sunny day in Southern California.
And the relocation going well? You guys feeling pretty well established? It's been a heck of a run, heck of a transition.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Uh-huh.
We're getting there. It's been it's been a sprint against the marathon. All good though. We get better every day.
That's good. So curious to get into how one goes from Hamilton College to the Los Angeles Chargers. But how'd you end up at Hamilton?
It was actually interesting story about Hamilton is my brother went there, and he was there as a result of David Green, who's now the president of Colby College. And so he turned him on to it. And David's family, my family, parents were friends growing up. And so he got exposure. He went there, and then I had the opportunity to visit up there and apply. And actually it came down to Hamilton and Union. And I had this interest in media, which obviously is not really a subject that Hamilton has on the roster. And actually I wanted to be a radio DJ. But I did an internship my junior year in high school, and the general manager of the radio station I did the internship with said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, I want to be a DJ." He said, "Well, let me tell you about being a radio DJ. Number one is you're going to have to move around the country a lot. You grew up in central Massachusetts. Number two, you don't make money unless you are in morning drive. And number three, you're not funny." So I think you ought to try something else and go into the business side of things. So I did that during my junior year and really just fell in love with media at the time. And I had my DJ business on the side and everything, and then came to look at schools and look, my mom was since my dad had graduated from Holy Cross, wanted me to stay local and go to Holy Cross, but as a last child, wanted me to go there, but I just kind of wanted to break out of Worcester a bit, and had the chance to visit Union. And it's kind of scary how this came down to. It's looked at Union and Hamilton, and Union had just finished their radio station, just finished building their radio station. And when I visited Hamilton said, "Hey, we've got this plan. Our student-run station, WHCL, is in minor theater right now. We're going to build a new radio station, and it's all student run, so you could have a part of that." And so I went early decision to Hamilton as a result of that one piece. And so that got the runway going, and it just felt, it going to the Hamilton campus just felt great. And that's how it gets started.
And did you get involved in the relocation of the radio station when you got there?
I did. The school gave me way too much responsibility that I was not probably ready to take on, but started at WHCL as afternoon drive show host on Friday afternoons with Jay Marsack, who was in our class. And we did I can't remember what we called it. It was something bar and grill. And we acted like we were broadcasting from a bar. We had a lot of fun with it and got to play our tunes. And then became production director there. And then after production director, ultimately became the general manager there. And they had said, we want student input into this new radio station we're building. And so I spent the time in my summer and then some of my winter breaks visiting different stations in central Massachusetts where I grew up, and getting ideas and like how to position the station. And shockingly, the school and the architects took the input, because I don't know if the architects had built radio studios before or anything like that, but that was a lot of fun. And so we worked on that, I think, through my sophomore and junior, probably a little senior year. And I don't believe it actually opened until right after I had left. And I think it was a year after I left, we came back for the 5th year reunion. and it had opened up. It was a pretty proud moment to go down into the basement of Bristol.
Yeah. See the fruits of your labor.
Yeah, and a lot. Like I said, they had taken just our thoughts and ideas and the team of people, and then they, crystallize them. And to see the neon, I can still picture today, neon WHCL sign. It's all squiggly lines on the neon. It was pretty fun to see that.
Well, as someone who spent a lot of time in that basement studio, I thank you for helping to make it happen, because it was a big part of my 4 years there for sure. And I went back to visit fairly recently, and now, that it's moved, it's bizarre just to see that as an empty space with a meeting room table in the middle of where the studio was. It's totally bizarre.
Yeah. So where is the station today?
It's above what would have been ELS.
Okay.
So they built a whole new student center over there. And upstairs from there, it's smaller than, it feels in some ways more like a college radio station would feel, because it's small. Yeah. There's a couch, and it has that college radio vibe. But what did I know at the time? But it always felt like, well, this feels very professional, with the production studio and some offices and the two other studios. It was pretty cool. I've spent a lot of time down there. And did you, because I know you ended up getting involved in radio after college. Was that the plan all along?
It was funny. I media or entertainment, radio was kind of my foundation. And I'll never forget, we had, I'd applied all over the place, coming out of school in 92. And this was back in the day when you'd send a letter and you'd send a resume and you'd send, a nice note or a fax. And I just kept getting rejected. And so there were rejection from CNN and ABC and then it got to the point where some of my roommates would take these letters and post them up on the wall at our dorm in Babbitt. And then when finally they got, I got the one from Disney. They're like, you're even getting turned down by Mickey Mouse. And so it was an interesting experience of just like, wow, either it's a combination of coming out of the 92, there was a bump in the economy at that point, and a lot of media was changing fast and cutting back. And then number two, just having no experience beyond, and obviously the WHCL experience, some other internship experience. And then, so I ultimately actually sat down with Neil Pilson in New York, CBS, who was a wonderful person, and it appeared at various times in my life and career in just these really remarkable different ways, and had written him a note and said, can we get together? And he said, get on a train, come on down, I'll give you 30 minutes or so. And walked into his office, and I'll never forget, he was in the midst of, he was on the phone, and he's with lawyers and so on and so forth. Just take a seat. And he was handling a situation with Pat Summerall. And at the time, Pat was getting suspended for various reasons. And he said, it's not my job to, I remember hearing him on the phone with the attorneys and saying, it's not my job to call out Pat Summerall. It's my job to say, hey, we're going to help Pat and get him set straight. And that was a remarkable way about him and about the way he handled that situation. And so then Neil set me up with a variety of different folks at ABC. At the times, Cap City ABC he had relationships there beyond CBS. And I ultimately, getting out of Hamilton, I got offered a position as a desk assistant at ABC News in New York. And it was, at the time, I think it was like $6 or $8 an hour. And my parents, who are both public school teachers, had, sacrificed a lot to put us through Hamilton, two of us at Hamilton and one at Dickinson and one at St. Anselm's, another sibling. And I was like, I can't put this burden on them, to go down to New York. So packed up my things from Hamilton and went home. And there's a family owned company I'd worked for in the summers, through college and high school and college, wonderful family owned company. And they offered me a job before I left and said, hey, come back. And you have a full-time job here in marketing when you graduate. And I really wanted to break out from my hometown. And here I was coming out of Hamilton, where everybody's going to New York and exciting different areas and all Wall Street and all that, P&G and all over the place. And here I am going back to my hometown, a little bit of my tail between my legs. And so I said, well, I'm just going to make the best of this. And so started working for that company, the family company. And then at night I would do an internship at the local cable station. So picture Wayne's World was basically my way to keep my foot in the door.
And that was just still a desire to be involved in media.
It was. And so did that for a year and ultimately ran into someone who offered me a position in Worcester Radio, working for the station. And the gentleman said, hey, the way this is going to work, though, is you have to give me 3 years. And I was like, I'm not ready for that. He said, you know what, though? He said, I like how you're approaching this. I like what you're doing. I'm going to call some people in Boston and set you up. And I got set up for an interview. And at the time, the two big talk stations there were WRKO and WHDH radio, AM radio back in the day when AM was a big thing. And went down there and did the interview with them and absolutely just flopped on the interview. And just, sat down at a table, which was do a presentation. And I stood up and people were like, why are you standing up right now? I'm like, well, I'm doing a presentation. And there was like 3 people in the room. They're like, hey, you don't need to stand up. You can sit down. And so I
and what kind of roles was this an ad sales role at that point? Or yeah,
it was an ad sales role.
Okay.
And I won't forget this part of it either, because it was interesting, because I was going back for my 5th year reunion. So I had gotten the call on, I think it was on Thursday or so. And I think we were leaving Friday morning to drive up to Hamilton for the 5th year reunion to hear about how wonderful everybody was doing and everything. Or maybe the first reunion, but I literally got the call from the station head in Boston saying, we're not going to hire you. And here I am at 22 years old thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to be in Worcester the rest of my life. I'm never going to be able to get out of my hometown. And I was like, how am I going to drive up to Hamilton? And like, how's everything going? Oh, I just got turned down from this job.
Right.
And everything. Well, probably a half hour later, I got a call from a gentleman, and he said, I've heard about you. I'm being told to talk to you. And he was ultimately became my boss and a friend. And he has this high pitched voice. And I was like, okay, who's screwing around with me? No one's calling me and playing a prank on me. And he said, no, I heard great things about you. We want you to come back on Monday or Tuesday and sit down with us. And it was with another station that was in the cluster, same company of radio stations that I'd gotten turned down on one side, and they were looking to hire on the other side.
Huh. And who referred you over there? Who?
It was one of the gentlemen who was involved in the interview process for the 2 AM radio stations, and said, I see something unique and different and special in this person. He might need to be a lot of polishing, doesn't know how to present, but he's, there's something there. Oh. And so he's like a floppy wet dog right now, but I think we can groom him and get him in shape. And
wow.
So left for Hamilton, went to the reunion, and then came back and did an interview. And the next thing you know, I was selling at Mix 98.5 in Boston, which I always joked that I got there my first day. I didn't know how to sell. I didn't know how to sell advertising. I didn't know how to sell radio. And I had no clue how to sell a female-based radio station that was targeting women 25 to 54. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine everything was going my way.
And presumably when you're starting, you're not getting a list that includes, big brands. You're calling mom and pop shops cold, probably.
100%.
Yeah.
And so I had the phone book and the newspapers and go figure it out. And so I did that, and I started there, and so I've got nothing to lose, and let's just get this thing started. And so I picked up a book or two a month on either sales or marketing or advertising or the female consumer, just to try and learn as much as possible. And then the other part of it was this learned early on, and I think Hamilton contributed to this as well, is to look at things differently. So the traditional new seller was going to go knock on every mom and pop door. By the time there was this thing kind of burgeoning of non-traditional revenue, showing how media could work differently to support the grocery business or different types of retail business and through the vendors and so on and so forth. So I launched onto that. And then all of a sudden it started to happen, and just kept my head down and kept working and working, and then business started to break.
That's awesome. So you're told you're not funny, and that pivots you away from a dream of being on air, but you stayed in it and still wanted to be a part of the business side. What was the draw of media and being in and around the radio? I can totally relate. There are similar sort of stories. In fact, our paths crossed not long after the point you're talking about, which I want to get to. But what was it that continued to bring you back to wanting to stay in that world?
I love learning and love to learn about things and about people and about businesses. And I love business. And what was great about media is I could start my day talking to a retailer. Then in the middle of the day, I'm talking to an automotive auto dealer. Then I'm talking to a grocery store. Then I'm talking to a mobile phone company. Then talking, and so it was like this ability to talk to a variety of different businesses and learn about them and what were their challenges, what were the kind of the mission of what they're trying to do, how are they going to get there through the objectives, and then give us the chance to step back and think creatively is how could I help them? And that was again, I think another thing I took out of Hamilton was it the liberal arts education is master of nothing and prepared for everything. And I didn't know all the nuts and bolts of the automotive business, but it was about learning to ask the right questions. And that's what I kind of built the foundation on, was how do I learn, to ask the right questions? Right.
I assume because I think there's some similarities to mine having growing up on the other side of the desk from what you're talking about as an advertiser. At some point when you're working on that, and then especially if you have an appreciation of media, when that deal you close, that ad you book, when that actually airs, there's a sense of, I put that there. That was mine, right? And especially early on, I imagine there's probably some pride in that.
This certainly was, and I was very fortunate to work with I got put on a team of people with exceptional sellers and very people that really took their craft to heart. And there was one woman in particular, Karen Westwig, who became Karen Summers, who married Bob Summers, who's a Hamilton grad, and I'd introduced them to each other. But Karen said, and she said, I want to be able to turn on the radio and have every commercial in one break be mine. And she said, when I succeed at doing that, then I'll know I've achieved success. And she did it. She was a phenomenal salesperson and marketer. And I'll never forget, she was like, listen to the commercial break, and 5 commercials in a row, every single one of them I had sold.
Well, then you fast forward to the summer of 1998, and I was a promotions intern at Mix 98.5 and Eagle 93.7, likely screwing up all of the promotional elements that you had booked. So I apologize for ruining probably some of your revenue by doing the wrong thing on site someplace. But then after that, and by the way, it was because I was clueless and stupid, blissfully unaware that there was a Hamilton grad walking the same halls that I was walking until after I left the internship and started thinking about what is, and then connected with you, and you were gracious enough to host me again, and I came back and visited and sort of gave me similar advice I think that you got about the radio industry, which I didn't listen to and still tried to pursue a career in it after our chat, but But I'm not the only one who you helped, because I had Frankie V on here as a guest, and he talked very highly of your role in helping to grow his career. What's with the giving back to the Hamilton network?
I enjoy it. I think a lot of it comes down to probably Neil Pilson. I think that was just to see that someone in my mind at that time, as I'm, hanging up rejection letters from Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and everything, that says, I'm going to give you my time and guidance and advice and guidance to help you along. I think that probably set the tone for me. And I still to this day get probably once a week, or at least a few times a month, I'll get requests to either inside Hamilton or outside Hamilton, is how did you get to where you are? Could you speak to my son or daughter or whatever it might be around sports? And I take those calls since we're on the West Coast while I'm out doing my morning jog. And I say, listen, if you're on the East Coast, you're lucky because you can call me between 5 and 6 a.m. And if you're on the West Coast, you're going to be up early. But I'll do 20 minutes or so with these different students and folks trying to break in, and just to give some guidance. And I think that's probably comes from my parents being teachers and public school teachers and lifelong educators, and just trying to advice is free to give and advice is free to get, but it's tremendously valuable to get. So that, and I really enjoy seeing people grow and trying to look at things through a different lens, because I believe there is something special in everyone, and at the same time, help them see the right path, like the general manager of the radio station that told me I wasn't funny, so he set me on the right path. And Neil Pilson set me on the right path, but and I laugh about, I mentioned Neil a bunch of times, but I was in, flash forward 20 plus years later, and there's a sports marketing firm that we've done some work with out here, and gotten to know the folks there, and have sent some people there to go work and everything. And the president and founder called me up one day, and he's like, "How do you know Neil Pilson?" I'm like, "I know him from the Hamilton story." And he said, "That's my mentor." And it's a small world story. So that was like 20 years later. Next thing you know, there's a text chain between myself and Jeff and Neil going back on. But it's pretty fascinating.
That's pretty awesome. Does the volume of requests for advice has that increased since becoming associated with the NFL and working with the Chargers?
I'd say so. Yes,
I see it, but now working at the NFL, it's
I'm shortly for you at the league office. It does, and a lot of times it's just my quick advice is, tell me what you love to do, and people often start with, "Well, I'm a huge sports fan." I'm like, no.
Yeah,
tell me what you love to do. You either love to sell, you love to market, or you love to operate. And that's where it starts, because peel back the onion of the fun of the sports and the excitement and the platform and everything. You got to have a craft, and you got to excel at that craft.
Right.
And that's where it starts. And a lot of I don't mean to, be blunt or harsh with a lot of these, kids, but I'll say, listen, if you're a good sports fan, go do something else and go buy some tickets. Right. This is Jerry Maguire. This is show business, not show fan. At the end of the day,
you'll end up enjoying your fandom more, but not working the job. For sure.
Exactly.
It's not uncommon for someone who had the early career trajectory you had to be a sales manager, general sales manager, run sales for the station, for the cluster, whatever it may be, and build a career in radio sales. You pivoted away from that. What spun you out of that trajectory?
Yeah, it was kind of really funny story. In random story is, so I started at Mix 98.5, did that for a couple of years, and always said to myself, by 25, I want to be in management. I'm going to be in management by 25. And in hindsight, that's another reason, later on the road, I would stayed doing what I was doing for longer, but I had this drive at that point. But what happened was I learned from my brother about reading, and he read the newspaper every single day, and still to this day does, and the importance of that. And so I had come across an article at one point or another about our trade publication that WFAN in New York was the #1 billing radio station in the country. And so all of a sudden, our organization purchased the rights to WEEI Sports Radio in Boston. And we bought the rights to it and moved it over to, ironically, 850 AM, which was WHDH, which was a station that originally turned me down from an offer. And it was down the hall. And I said to myself, Boston's a pretty good sports town. We're going to relaunch this thing. And I think I should go down there and work down there. And ultimately worked for the gentleman who had recommended me, said, I saw something special, who recommended me to go to Mix 98.5. And then went through the political battle of, okay, I need to go down the hall. And so I started in business development down there, and kind of rose up through the ranks there and said, we're going to build something here and build something special. And we took it from, I don't know, it was like $8.5 million a year in revenue to, the time I left, it was $49.5 million a year in revenue. And it done that from 96 to 09. And we had been to 5 Super Bowls, 2 World Series, NBA championship. I think we won one and we lost one because we had the Celtics, Red Sox, and Patriots as our partners. And I always had this curiosity of going to the team side, but I couldn't do it in Boston because we had relationships with all of them and they wouldn't hire away from the rights holder.
Interesting.
And so, and I'd been there at that point, like I said, 13 years, and we'd grown it tremendously. And it was like, I probably, if I hindsight 2020, probably spent 5 years too long there, but we were having so much fun building it. And how can you not, with all those different championships and everything happening and runs and high moments and very, very low moments, like 2003, Aaron Boone, Game 7, New York Yankees. But it was kind of by happenstance again. It was the chief operating officer of the Boston Red Sox, a gentleman by the name of Mike D, got announced as the CEO of the Miami Dolphins. And I bumped into him at a Yankees Red Sox game, a couple weeks later, and said, "Hey, congratulations on your opportunity. And man, that's amazing." And he turned around and saw me probably another few innings later, and he said, "Hey, do you want to come to Miami? I've seen what you've done here. I've seen what you've done on as our partner. I need someone to come down and run revenue for me and on the media side." And I was like, I'm never leaving Boston, that type of thing. And he called me up a few weeks later and he said, "Hey, we're thinking about renegotiating a radio deal. Would you give me some advice on it?" I was like, "Sure." So I got some information and I wrote him a paper, a document that basically
True Hamilton
said,
man.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about, I said, it's not about the radio station. It's about getting people to your website because your larger revenue source is ticket sales. So it needs to be an agnostic media platform that ultimately serves your retail store to get people in the fold so then you can sell more tickets, et cetera. And I sent it to him. And he called me back the next day and he was like, "We're playing the Indianapolis Colts on Monday Night Football to kick off the season. You are getting on a plane and you're coming down here and you're going to sit with us." And then this courtship began, and it took a little bit. And for me to pull myself out of Boston was a little bit of a stretch for a little bit. But I was like, you know what, you got to do this because you're not going to be able to do it in Boston because of the restrictions. And you've had the experience of all the different teams. You felt like it never felt like we were in radio because we were in sports radio, which always felt different than normal radio. And he and I worked out a plan. And I remember my brother, Rick, gave me advice at the time as he said, "Hey, there will always be radio. You can go back to it, but you should just stretch and do this." And so I went to Miami as senior VP and really thought about how do we, and again, it goes back. I feel like I'm doing a Hamilton commercial here, but we looked at it and said, we can't look at it as a football team. We need to think about ourselves as a media company to compete for the total media dollars in Miami. So if you added up the Heat, the Panthers, the Marlins, and the Dolphins at the time, it was about $100 million in revenue. If you added up TV, radio, digital, social, etc., it was a $1.2 billion market. And so we want to fish in the big ocean of the 1.2 versus the, scrapping it out amongst the four teams.
Right.
And so that's how we positioned it. And we went down and we said, we're going to rethink how we're setting ourselves up, and we're going to build this operation. And we had a wonderful group of people that we worked with, starting in 09 to 14 and 13 rather. And we went from 19th in the league in revenue to 11th in the league over that 4-year period, because we had unlocked a lot of value in the property, and really worked with some people, terrific people that had been there, and then brought in some people new thinking, brought everybody together. And now I was in the NFL, and I was like, okay, here we are.
And what's interesting to me about that is, when you talk about the growth of WEEI, that coincided with an incredible run for the teams, which I'm sure helped when making phone calls and trying to book revenue. But the growth you're talking about with the Dolphins, it's not like, God love them, but it's not like the Dolphins were winning Super Bowls left and right and had, building a winning season after winning season. So you were doing it with a different sort of challenge, but we're still able to do that. How much of the team's success and how much of it is just, you just got to go out and hustle, and there's still opportunity because it's still, people want to be associated with the local team?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, they say when you're on the business side of sports, winning makes the beer colder and the hot dogs warmer and the air fresher. When you're on the losing side of it, you gotta figure out. And so I was a lifelong Patriots fan growing up. When I was growing up, and here I go into Miami, and we beat Miami. We beat the Patriots my first game in Miami, and we proceed to lose to them for the next 4 years, and then we beat them in my last game in Miami. So we had to be very focused on being solutions based, and really there's a great line. I think it was someone from Priceline or something that says, no one woke up this morning and said, gosh, I wish I could get in a cab or get in an Uber, drive to a place with a lot of people, get frisked, walk into a tube, sit in an uncomfortable seat for 3 or 4 hours, come out, lose my belongings when I go to find them on the baggage belt, and then land somewhere else. And, no one, and so, but people woke up this morning and said, I got to go to my sister's wedding. And so that's what we had took the approach of. No one woke up this morning and said, gosh, I wish I could buy some LED signage, or I wish I could have my name on the ribbon board or the video board. But people woke up businesses wake up every morning saying, I've got problems. And that's kind of the approach we took, is how can we help you get to where you want to go faster or in a bigger way by using the power of sports and the relationship sports has with consumers and businesses and fans, et cetera. And that's really channeling what sports has. And that's a special, unique connection between people that happens in sports. So that was kind of the basis of our approach. So I got there in 09. In the spring of 10, I think it was, the Heat signed LeBron, and they had the big three. And we were just like, I remember our CEO calling us and being like, oh, how could this have happened? Because Miami's a fickle sports town as it is, and it gets even more fickle when that happens. But we fought through it, and we had a lot of creativity and a lot of hard work and a lot of focus and discipline as well in our approach.
And talk about some of the challenges you're working through now in the current gig. So you like to make things complicated for yourself by taking on new challenges every so often.
Yeah. So this one is by far the most complicated one I've ever been involved in my career. And I don't know what, whatever, comes next. It'll never be as complicated as this one. I mean, you think about it. When they get introduced to someone actually through the league office to ownership here and at the Super Bowl in San Francisco, Super Bowl 50, in 2017, I think that was winter of 2017. And we sat down and just had a conversation, and I just looked at it and said, think about it this way. We've got 14 teams, 18 million people, and 14 million tickets for sale. And we all just kind of looked at each other like, wow, this is gonna be quite the challenge.
Yeah.
And so moving a 60-plus-year-old franchise from one market to the next, restarting in the second largest market in the country with a direct competitor in another NFL team, and just being a startup. So I started in May of 2017, and we literally had 10 people here in the office on May 15th. And it was like, okay, training camp's coming up July 29th. We got to get going.
Wow.
And so we started and just had a really wonderful group of people and wonderful support from ownership. What do you guys need to get things done and get started? And we had to get prepared, in less than 2 months to stand up a training camp. And then we had to be prepared to go into a temporary facility in Carson, which was 26,000 people, which had never been done at an NFL stadium before. And it was,
right.
It was like watching an NFL in a Texas high school football stadium. And so that was our day job. And we always joked about our night job was getting ready for the new stadium that was going to open up in 2019 originally. And then it rained so much in 17 that the stadium that's 100 feet below ground turned into a pond and had to get moved out to open up in 2020. So we, worked through 17 to get ready for 17, the back half of 17. Then we had our season 18. Then we went to the playoffs, which was huge. And we played New England, which was an interesting experience. We go back home for that. And then we got really started on 19. We were doing kind of both at the same time. And then we could really go full force on the new stadium. There was a provisions that said, in the summer of 19, we could start working on 2020. And we were about 6 months into it and the pandemic hit.
Yep.
I don't know if there's more adversity and opportunity that probably has been created my first 5 years out here. And I got married and have had 2 kids. So, you talk about adversity, opportunity, and life changing
and complicating your life. Yeah.
At the same time. And, I would say people are, how have you gotten through it? And, in 17, it was really, this thing dawned on me about prioritize, compartmentalize, and scale. Mm-hmm. It's got to be constantly prioritized, compartmentalized. You're going to go from one issue or opportunity or moment of greatness, to the next. Then how do you continue to scale? Mm-hmm. And then the second thing is, quite honestly, someone turned me on to Ryan Holiday, who writes a lot about Stoicism, and has written a lot of, and I've read a lot of his books now, which is, I wish I'd been told about that 20 years ago. But that's been extremely helpful, kind of having a balanced mindset as you go through these different, like I say, challenges and opportunities.
Yeah. One challenge I'm interested in, you talked about some of the things you faced in Miami, and then the sort of the market conditions you referenced with LA. Inglewood suddenly with an explosion of options, right? There's the stadium there, the forums there. Ballmer's building that massive arena next door. Boy, there's a lot of competition. And never mind just all the other entertainment choices that exist in and around LA.
And what you describe is in a 30-block radius.
It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. I mean, you can stand there and you can see them all just standing there. It's unbelievable.
And so if you go north to south, so start at the Hollywood sign, work your way back, you've got the Forum, which is an iconic facility, and it's really been redone. And now, of course, Steve Ballmer bought that from MSG.
Yeah.
And then start going south, you've got SoFi Stadium, which is our main purpose, 70,000 person stadium for football, concerts, soccer, etc. And then you go to south that is American Airlines Plaza, which can be a multi-purpose indoor-outdoor facility that can do events up to like 10,000 people. And then you've got YouTube Theater, which is connected to the stadium, which is a 6,000 person intimate concert, esports, conference facility. And then just south of that is now Intuit Dome, which is going to be, I think, 15 to 18,000 people as well. So Inglewood was always, positioned as a city of champions back in when the Lakers days and the Kings days there around the Forum. And now it's incredible to see how that area has changed and is barely just getting started, right? It's been incredible watch. And then oh, by the way, 10 miles away is the LA Live, which is still a terrific setup and facility with Crypto.com arena and everything.
Right. So of the elements you mentioned in and around SoFi, so now your role is figuring out on behalf of the Chargers how to utilize all that space to generate revenue for the organization?
So primarily, we're technically a tenant of SoFi. We're a partner in the operation, and it's a separate organization. So the Rams are a tenant, we're a tenant, and then a separate organization runs the building day to day. So part of my responsibility is, one, the relationship between us and the stadium operator. And then number two, on the business strategy front, is pulling a little bit back from the day-to-day revenue driving, but more looking at long-term. Because some of the things they need to be thinking about is based upon the agreements, the relationships that we strike, the relationships we're in, is how will this impact revenue today, but then also down the road. And that's kind of, the evolution of what I've been doing is because, you think back to how, the partnerships are struck and everything. And like I said, incredibly complicated project between, two NFL teams. There hasn't been an NFL team here in 22 years, second largest market, an incredible stadium. That's also a multi-purpose facility. And then there's a whole media and content element to what we do today. Our media and content team has just done phenomenal work and won a Webby Award a couple of times. And that's unusual for sports teams. But it's how are we setting up for an always on relationship with our fans? I kind of think about the stadium is like Magic Kingdom, and you see what Disney is, a wonderful sketch that Walt Disney did in 1957. If you ever Google Walt Disney's vision, 1957, and he brings all the incredible visionary. He brings all the different touch points that they would have around content. It was all designed to drive people back to the Magic Kingdom. And so you think about all the touch points we have and what with sports today is all with the goal of get people to the Magic Kingdom being SoFi Stadium.
Smart.
And then, now we just announced a new training facility as well that we're going to open up. So once we think we're just getting us in, we're going to open up a new facility in 2024, and we're going to build. We're going to that's in construction right now. That will help add to that concept of, the always on relationship building, telling stories about our fans, telling a story about our players, obviously, and then bringing those together with brands.
So that facility will have fan-facing elements, presumably sponsorship opportunities and sponsoring on-site opportunities. Yeah, we will.
Yeah, and with the ultimate goal of doing something, doing some sort of events there, and then also it's like a studio lot every day because there's so much content being created around the teams and around the players.
Being in and around sports and still media in many ways, when you walk by a studio or you walk by a camera crew, do you ever feel that old urge to jump in there?
No. I get my fix this way, like,
There you go.
But
There you go.
but I do say it's another interesting thing is a little story is that we were with the Dolphins. We were playing the Baltimore Ravens in Baltimore, and we were waiting on Saturday night to go downstairs we were downstairs. We were waiting to go with sponsors for dinner and with some of the football operations folks. And it was standing in the lobby of the hotel, and it was myself and Jeff Ireland, who was the general manager at the time at the Dolphins, and then we were at the and I think he's in New Orleans, the Saints now, and we're both standing there watching one of the college football games on Saturday afternoon, and it dawned on me, and I'll never forget this. He said, I looked at him, I go, he starts talking about, look at that player, look at that player, look at that player, and I'm like, you and I are watching two totally different games right now. I'm looking at the signage. I'm looking at the LED. I'm looking at like who's advertising, and he's looking at it. And I'm like, and so that was kind of, really an awareness thing for me, which is like, understand what game you're watching and what game the people you're with.
That's interesting. Watching. That's interesting. Is that a part of your sports fandom or sports viewership now? Always? Are you watching, a baseball game and noticing what's going on in stadium and who the sponsors are? And
always, sadly, always. We have a 1 hour block between, typically when we're on the road. We actually started this in Miami. It used to be you'd leave the hotel at 10, get to the stadium at 11, and really nothing happens between 11 and 12. And then between 12 and 1 for 1 o'clock kickoff, things start to happen. So we're like just standing around. And so I started this thing called the game film, where I just go walk the stadium and take photos and notes. And I said, if football has a game film, then business should have a game film. And that's so smart. We would take that, and on the plane ride home, I download our pictures and our notes, and then all through the game, we take photos and stuff. And then we share it back with the team on Monday after Miami, after we typically lost. It was something uplifting, but if we won, it was even better to have a victory Monday. And but we started the game film, and the idea was to share how we all were watching a different game. And probably the most pride I got out of it was, after doing it for about a year, Nat Moore, who's a wonderful person, alumnus down at Miami, still with the front office there, known for the helicopter catch against the New York Jets back in the day when he got hit, and he literally did a helicopter into the end zone. Nat started to pull my my wrist during the game and go, see that. And I was like, I've converted a football guy into looking at it through the business lens.
Interesting.
That's wonderful. So we still joke about the game film still happens. I can't help myself. I'll just take note.
Back to the point before about telling the young student who's interested in getting into sports that if you're truly doing it to be a fan, it changes your fandom, and it changes how you experience the sport. Not necessarily for the worse or the better, but you're not sitting there and watching the game and just high-fiving everybody. There's actually a business purpose to what you're doing.
Absolutely. And that's what it is. It's entertainment, it's media, it's business, it's all that across the board. And you think about, the football is only in play for 11 to 13 minutes in every game. Right. And it's a 3.5 hour game. And so there's a lot of activity that goes around outside of just the 11 minutes the game is the balls are 13 minutes the game. The ball is actually in play.
What do you think that kid in Worcester who was trying to crack into the radio industry would think of you now?
Oh, wow. I think he would be proud. Kind of like, wow, a little wow moment. But also saying, man, if you just had reflected a little bit more as you were going forth, you could have learned a lot more along the way. And not this, I think like the example of stoicism stuff. I'm like, if I had seen that, there's years before, but that's part of growing up, right?
Yeah.
So There was a high school friend of mine who this kind of brings it all back. Is high school friend of mine who was I was at the radio station on a Saturday or Sunday, and he was giving the commencement speech at Northeastern University, and President Clinton, the sitting president at the time, was there, and he got up and to give his commencement speech, and he started singing, like totally would be like supposed to start a speech, and he started singing Deo, 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 we want to go home. And he gave this incredible speech about how he and his family were homeless during high school, and none of us knew it. And that he had made his way through, and his mom just kept saying, see that light up there in the corner, just keep looking for it. And you can be one of those kids that could say, I coulda, I shoulda, I woulda, or I can, I will, I did. And that moment hit me, and I wrote that down. I had that piece of paper with me for probably 15 plus years, and just said, I can, I will, I did. And Doug Lofgro and he's a doctor now, and he went on to Harvard and just did incredible. Got his additional degrees and has just done incredible work. But two things about that was, one, our parents were taking care of them on the side, but none of us kids knew. It was pretty remarkable about our parents and a group of family of friends' parents. And then two, him putting that out there was pretty moving. And then three, seeing all he's accomplished. And that was, for me, a big motivator at the time. It's just every time I get in a time where you get in a challenging moment, you say, I can, I will, I did.
That's awesome. Anything you wish you had known when you back when you were starting at Hamilton, with all this wisdom gained through the years?
I think probably to pace, don't race. And I often said, and you never know whether I started out selling, and I was like, I want to be a manager by 25. And I probably moved a little bit too fast, put a little bit too much pressure on myself. But then that meant I had to be that much better at learning on the job. And then had to work that much harder to get ahead of my experience. That was also some advice someone gave me about running marathons as well. Pace, don't race.
Right.
That's a sprint. There's going to be sprints, but understand you're part of a marathon.
All right, that's Jim Rushton, class of 1992. If you watch Sunday Night Football this week, you can see the Chargers take on the Broncos. And if you watch the game like Jim watches the game, chances are you'll see some of his work throughout SoFi Stadium. My thanks to Jim for joining, and good luck to the Chargers the rest of the way this season. You have been listening to Had I Known at WHCL FM, Clinton, New York. Had I Known.buzzsprout.com. Had I Known Show on social media. As always, my thanks to Dr. Michael Woods for supplying the music on the show. And once again, Doc is going to play us out. Hope you enjoyed the show. We'll talk to you next week.
podcast show on your radio or take it to go.